So hey everybody, how you doing today? My name's Greg. I work at a company called Proofpoint. I'm gonna have a tough time standing still just on the podium here, so forgive whatever this is going on. The topic today is something that a lot of people have put a lot of effort and work into, both within Proofpoint and externally. So far too many people to thank, but that topic is, it's a little bit sexy. It's garnered some international intrigue and made some headlines, but I wanted to start with what the talk is not. And this is sort of my reverse Oprah moment where I promise there are going to be no gross .NET info stealers you're going to have to look at, no ransomware leak sites, and nothing at all like an offensive security tool. But I wanted to get started with a little audience participation. Who here thinks that taxation is theft? All right, you all find each other after the presentation and leave the rest of us alone. But we know taxation is the primary way that if you're a government, you bring funds in to keep doing government-y things like saying that marijuana is illegal and stuff like that. But suppose that you're a government and say your staunch political ideologies and your paranoid hold on power make the rest of the world not really want to trade or engage with you. And then because of that isolation, your citizens don't really have enough money for it to be worth taxing them. And then say, you know, you have this problem where you need to keep firing missiles. The emojis look better when I sent the slides in. And developing a nuclear weapons program. And those things are expensive. And if you can't tax your citizens, how else are you going to get money to keep doing this? You steal it. And so funnily enough, we're not talking about some campy James Bond villain, but a real country, North Korea. Some of you may have heard of it. And North Korea's been isolated for a pretty long time. And so they've gotten pretty good at stealing currency, crypto or otherwise, in various forms. Think things like the Bangladesh bank heist, whatever sort of black market drug trade you can think of. And cryptocurrency has sort of been their new game since around 2017. And in my opinion, they're pretty good at it. And this number looked a lot cooler before Tracy got up here to show the size of the marijuana business. But this is data that I'm blatantly stealing from Chainalysis. Over the last 2 years, this is how much they have stolen in crypto heists, according to Chainalysis data. And where this number gets interesting is that Sean Lingus from CNN put out a really good report this last week where the White House is now estimating that over half of North Korea's nuclear missile program is being funded by these crypto heists. So there's a pretty big implication there. I wish they would just buy weed with it, but what are you going to do? So one of their main players in sort of the crypto acquisition space is a group we call TA444. You might know them from their hits like password.txt.lnk. They also go by Dangerous Password and a couple of other things that are up there. Do not take pictures of the copernicium word. That is deprecated. You cannot say that around a Microsoft employee. It is now sapphire sleet. But they go after sort of targets that you would expect someone interested in cryptocurrency to go after. Exchanges, decentralized financial organizations, and the like. And so while they've been active in this space for, since roughly 2017, about 8 months ago, we saw a shift in their activity to throwing sort of everything at the wall. And not unlike the greater e-crime landscape, post macros, they tried a lot of different things. We ran a blog on them in January and sort of ran through like this startup set of tropes that we ascribe to them. And fortunately for you all, we won't have to do that because they've stayed just as busy. And so we're going to explore a couple of their newer infection chains since that piece came out. And also wanted to touch on before we get into those, that they've shifted some of their like tactics and techniques in terms of targeting, and they're going after smaller and smaller cryptocurrency entities. And they're doing what a lot of other North Korean groups do, which is this benign email conversation starter. Usually that sort of initial social engineering would take place somewhere like LinkedIn, but we're just not sure if they can't find them on there, if it's easier to just directly email, because we don't operate the social networks and they won't tell us when we ask them. So despite the fact that they work for a government, their lures can be pretty timely and topical. So they really reflect the sort of targets they go after. You're not really confusing this by hitting a government employee with a blockchain style lure. But like any other threat actor, they have their little goofs. I don't think that the shield for Azure is an approved icon, and I know that the Adobe lock there on the bottom right is not something anybody but a threat actor has used. And so if we take a step back and look at the number of different file formats we saw them trying in their initial access campaigns over the last year or so, and compare that number to the actors that Selena and Joe touched upon in their talk, they're really doing well keeping pace with these prolific initial access brokers and sort of trying all these different things. And then when you compare them to what we see in the targeted threat landscape, well, they're sort of running away with it, which has made my job kind of fun to have to learn all these different file formats, although I was fortunately not on the OneNote Tiger team. And so the long story short is they've tried a bunch of different file formats. I'm not going to make you read off this slide, and we're going to explore a couple of their newer infection chains that we've seen this last year. The first one is their first confirmed foray into the Mac OS ecosystem. Jamf put out an awesome blog on this that ended in a third stage payload called Rust Bucket. But it starts with an Apple scriptlet file that beacons out to a command and control server. That sends back a Mac OS app that runs and uses a 100-byte XOR key to decrypt a PDF, which displays lure content to the user, and then also decrypts the second stage C2 to pull down an additional payload. And what's fun is if you anchor on that XOR key, you actually find a nearly identical infection chain with a little bit of different PDF content, but built entirely for the Windows platform. And this wasn't something that was written in Go or another cross-compilable language. It was two distinct sort of software sets sharing a C2 on the same day and using the same sort of tactics and XOR keys. So it was pretty fun to try and suss out what was what with this flow. The next infection chain that we saw them trying in February was the use of a .reg file, which sort of unsurprisingly modifies values in the registry to disable some security settings, enable contact to the C2, and then from a different domain, pull down a .poc file, which effectively modifies proxy settings on the host to funnel all of the traffic to a particular port whenever the host contacts a TA444 C2. We didn't get an additional payload out of this, although one of the documents that came bundled in the zip did do template injection, so we suppose a sort of second stage macro could have been pulled down to facilitate that next stage getting loaded. And a much more straightforward sort of chain is their delve into OneNote. Selena accurately predicted this in December while we were still drafting the blog and said, when are they going to do OneNote? If we had just waited till February, we would have caught it. And this is a much more straightforward style infection chain where they just put an intermediate MSI file to execute their sort of main first stage backdoor right now called curl agent. It's just bundled in plain text on the host. And so if you have a rule to detect the PE, you're going to detect it inside the OneNote file. And what's fun about this one too is that depending on the architecture that you look at the OneNote file in, you're going to get different content. We aren't entirely sure if that's for them to sift out only targeting a specific set of people based on if it's x64 or x86, or if it's just an error. And we'd be remiss to talk about this group without talking about a very fun error that we saw in December, sending out maybe the worst lure I've ever seen. And I don't know if any of you have ever gotten an invoice from OneNote or OneDrive, but I don't think those really happen. Attachments is spelled with an R. Microsoft has a dash in the middle of it. And that link where you click View Document actually takes you out to a customized phishing page that didn't really look anything like them. So we're not entirely sure if this was them or if it was someone maybe borrowing their C2 for the day. It's a question that will remain open. So looking ahead, if you're in the crypto space, please don't say, oh, I'm too small for these guys to be interested in me. You know, where there's money, they will go. Detecting them, though, can be pretty straightforward. And there are a lot of things they do on the network, especially after they land, with sort of set protocol structures, as well as reliance on MSHTA and WScript for sort of second order stuff. And poor Jake's lapsus graphic sort of made me feel sad because I have this follow-up graphic that sort of has been me trying to figure out where the edges of all this North Korean crypto activity has been. Jake, I'm praying for you, brother, because this gave me a headache and I had to go outside and smoke a cigarette, and it was not the lapsus document. Can we all be cool and say that this is just a draft? It is a work in progress. It's not done. But the lines of where all these operations have been is getting pretty blurry. And and where sort of the edges aren't as clean as they were even a year ago. And so with that, I'm going to learn my lesson and stick to APT research and not e-crime. And thank you so much, SLEUTHCON, for your time.